Hi, this is Rahman Sheikh. Welcome to Fortnightly Railway Transportation Systems Podcast. I am the host and railway systems specialist working in this industry for 24 years and counting. This podcast is primarily focused on railway experts who have vast amount of experience and contributed greatly to this amazing industry. This is not a technical seminar but focuses on feel good stories, individual journeys, their success and failures, motivating younger generation to kickstart their career in railways and creating a sense of pride for the railway people who devoted their lives on the most environment friendly public transportation. Our guest for this fortnight is Pete Church, Head of Rail Delivery for Transport for New South Wales. Pete gained a Bachelor of Civil Engineering from University of Leeds before staying on to study for a PhD in Surveying and Photogrammetry. After quitting his PhD, about halfway through, he stumbled into a job in British Rail. He worked in several areas, including bridge design and permanent way before moving into client side management of complex railway projects. After nearly 20 years in the UK, he headed to Australia, where he has led the delivery of some interesting and diverse transport projects, including Wynyard Walk, Beeline, Barangaroo Ferry Hub, as well as some familiar rail projects. Hi, Pete. Welcome to Railway Transportation Systems Podcast. Thank you for joining and agreeing to spend some time sharing your insights with us.
Thanks, Rahman. Lovely to be here. See what happens in the next half an hour or so.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure people would gain something from out of this podcast and take your experience moving forward, which they can implement in their professional lives. So this is a generic question. Can you please tell us about your professional transport industry journey so far?
Yeah, well, it's been a bit of a while now. I like to think it isn't 30 years, but it's sort of 30 years. As you sort of said in the intro, I lived a fairly academic life until a point where I quit my PhD because thought it was about time I actually earned some money. And I quit at a really good time, just in time for a big economic downturn in Europe and the UK, and then spent about 9 months unemployed before stumbling into a job with British Rail, literally because one of my friends saw an advert in the paper and I thought I was applying for anything at the time. I was too academic for construction companies and I was too engineering for management consultancies. And freakishly ended up with British Rail, stumbled into a job where I started work in the bridge design office all those years ago in 1991. I found railways generally to be quite sort of fascinating because I'd just really associated railways with, running trains, and that was it. Not really thought about it from an engineering perspective or, sort of project sort of perspective at all. And it's only really when I got inside that I found sort of that sort of fascination of networks and transport systems sort of generally. And then moved into permanent way. Background in surveying and mathematics and things like that was really sort of suited to sort of permanent way design, vehicle kinematics and things like that. Love that, and worked for a really interesting guy who's like brilliant educator, and not just as part of his role as sort of the manager of sort of the team, but actually telling you about the history of things and how engineering standards constructed and how we did things. Learned a lot from him. And then someone suggested that I should go and fill a gap on the client side, project side delivery. And then I stumbled into the love of projects and all things complex. And if there's anything I learned about the railway is complexity of operations and delivering projects is epic. And there's always something that's different in every project that you do. Even when you have two things that look really similar, whether it's all the engineering aspects, any sort of station upgrade, all look the same, but there'll be something that makes it subtly different and makes them very different sort of projects to deliver. And love working on projects. Did about 9 years on West Coast route modernisation, which was the biggest construction project in Europe at the time, and great exposure to mega projects and really complex delivery sort of situations. And then from there over to Australia, just after the sort of GFC and when sort of work in the UK become a little bit more bland and a little bit less interesting, thought I'd see what was going on over here. After a year or a year and a half here, I ended up with in Transport for New South Wales, delivering some of our sort of keynote projects like, like sort of Wynyard and ETTT and Beeline. And again, same sort of thing, Beeline buses, not really many trains or railway in there, but that same sort of complexity of sort of projects and problem, but also like getting really close to those sort of things that make a sort of difference. And actually that sort of understanding that sort of transport is a great enabler, whether it's like being able to get people around for economic benefit or from like get people to school or universities and things like that. The difference that good transport projects gives is immense. And actually putting in this sort of role in transport, putting you closer to sort of that end product and the difference that you can see it make to customers, communities, that's a great thing. And that's what I like about transport. That's what I like about railways. And that was a brief synopsis of 30 years.
Yep, I think we're very glad you're in transport industry, and you're a great find for transport for New South Wales, Pete. Your journey is an amazing journey, very inspirational. I would say it's more an accident rather than your choice. And going back to your current role, my question is, what does a typical day in the life of head of rail delivery looks like?
Yeah, that's a really easy answer. I don't think there is such a thing as a typical day. Your day always starts off with plan and intentions, but pretty rapidly anything can happen in the next sort of 5 minutes, whether it's something urgent that comes out of the minister's office that needs a rapid response on, or, you bump into someone and have those sort of tea room conversations, corridor conversations where you get a little bit of inspiration for something to do or someone to connect to, or to try and get 2 or 3 people to talk together about a particular problem or a particular issue. I really don't think there is a typical day. I think there were some very typical days during the last 2 years of COVID where it was get up, run, sit in front of a screen for 8 or 10 hours day. But I think from a working context, every day is different, and no 2 days unfurl the way that you expect them to be when you get out of bed in the morning.
Yep. Anyways, listening to your story, it looks like you have got quite occupied days and probably requires a lot of energy boosting. How do you refill?
I don't know. I think I get a lot of energy from working around other people. And I'm on the record of saying the last 2 years for me working on teams, I found to be quite hard. You don't get that feel of energy and the vibe in the room. Whereas if you're working in project teams before, there's a lot of face-to-face interaction, the ability to bounce ideas off people. I think that's where I draw a lot of my energy sort of from, and that's not just about in response to and reaction to firefighting and to problems, but it's that ability to motivate and move people, particularly in the sort of early stages of projects where you're trying to focus on resolution or getting a good design outcome, or if you're in the sort of delivery phase, trying to get that momentum into sort of delivery so that we respect the time commitments we've got at the back end to get things done by, because projects aren't just about the joy of engineering. They're actually about a product that someone's going to use.
You touched such a critical points, and I have got those questions lined up. I will deep dive into it. But going to that part of questioning, I would like to know, being head of rail delivery, it takes time to gain trust of co-workers to get them on board with your ideas. So what do you think is the most challenging aspects in your role to do certain things?
That's a really tough question. I think the important thing for me is we have a head of rail delivery. There are a lot of people who sit in the rail delivery organisation, and everyone from top to bottom has something that contributes to the end game. And actually, you need to be able to listen to the sort of the most junior of staff or on newer entries, whether they've come from different parts of transport or external or whatever. Everyone's got something new and a different take on how you might deliver a project or resolve a problem. It's really important that they feel that there's an environment where they can get those sort of things on the table and get them properly discussed, because some of those things are the things that make a difference to how we, the projects we deliver and the work that we do. My job is just to sort of make sure that we have a functional organisation that allows that to sort of happen. So that's the easy part of things, not solving the problems. It's making sure we've got a team of smart people that can think and feel free to think and voice their opinions.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Pete. It's a great observation and great insight. I completely agree with you. Apart from that, Pete, generally, when we investigate tasks related to identifying physical evidence or gathering information, collecting evidence in a day-to-day project life cycle, what are the key credentials you, from a senior management perspective, investigate in the individuals before assigning them a particular role or a task?
These are all hard questions you're asking me now, Rahman. But I think it depends upon the sort of nature of the projects. I mean, one of the things I'm really keen on is that when we get new people into the organisation, we give them what I'll say soft landings. We don't drop people who are new to the business into the most difficult project, the ones that are in trouble, those sort of things. We've got to give them an environment where they can feel safe in the organisation and actually understand the organisational sort of structures and politics and all the other things that go on, so that they then feel part of the family and are able to express what they can do and demonstrate what they can do in a pretty safe environment. The difficult tasks will come later, as they've sort of established themselves. I'm also really keen as well that we have a mobile workforce. So our project managers have experience in many different domains. And even if you look within rail delivery, everyone just thinks, just brownfield rail. But we have so much more than that. We have infrastructure projects like sort of tap and car parks, brownfield rail improvements through sort of more trains and more services. We've got rolling stock delivery. We've now got sort of the technology end in ATP and sort of digital systems. It's really important, I think, that our PMs, SPMs, PDs grow some experience across those domains, let alone talking about roads and ferries and other parts of transport. That sort of breadth gives you a better way of dealing with problems when they do arise. It gives you a better experience of working in different team environments with different focuses. So it's not so much about individuals' capabilities and individuals' tasks. It's about trying to create an organisation which values that sort of flexibility and mobility. So people have broader learning. I think they're in a better position to respond when challenges are sort of put their way. So sometimes it is a little bit of matching the task to the person. Sometimes people will actually self-select the way that they want to go. And I think, as well, we've got a number of people particularly within rail delivery now, who don't see themselves pigeonholed as a particular type of project manager. They see themselves as someone who's adaptable and, interested in a challenge in a different environment. And I think sometimes people who come in clean, if they've got no rolling stock background, for example, They can look at the problems differently and actually bring a different light to the issue and ask the questions that sometimes they're impossible to say, so.
They get an independent review because a person looking with fresh eyes. And thanks for the insights, Pete. I know you got such a challenging job. We know a few things like taking deep breath, know when to express ourselves, giving space to ourselves when people test our patience. In your role, I know your patience is tested quite a lot. How do you keep your emotions in check?
I think you should ask some of the EDs. They might have a different opinion on that, or people who've worked with it closely over time. I think you should never be afraid to actually express how you sort of feel, and if something's frustrating you, you should let people know that you're really frustrated with the sort of situation. But there's also an importance in actually being a little bit balanced about that. It's not about the individual. It's about the sort of situation and your emotional sort of state that's important to convey. I also think as well there are times when we are all faced with ugly challenges, whether they're serious safety incidents or environmental incidents, things like those sort of things, where it's really important that as your role as a leader particularly is to provide that sort of calm, measured direction that's required in those sort of situations. And I think one of those sort of personal traits I have is where things are going badly wrong, to be able to step back and actually provide that sort of calm direction is a really important character trait. I don't know how I do those sort of things, but I know I do those when we're in real problems of duress. In the day-to-day, though, it's important that people actually understand who you are as a person, because that way, we all respond, we all have our pressures. There's a bit more respect in a sort of two-way sort of situation, because you don't quite know what's going on in everybody else's life. You don't know what stresses and pressures there and outside of work. It's important that they feel emotionally liberated to do their sort of best job at the time, you know?
Yep. Thanks, Pete. And with this, I got a concurrent question which is lined up with the question I asked. With so many distractions, especially in your role, how do you remain engaged in a conversation?
Yeah, I think it is really difficult. And I think over the course of 30 years, it's growing exponentially more difficult. And certainly, like I said, the last couple of years, we're doing stuff on Teams or Zoom or whatever. You've got a screen in front of you. There's probably email notifications flipping up. You've got a phone, an iPad, whatever. You get notifications and 47 different apps open in front of you. Trying to remain present has become a real problem. And I know that certainly over the last few years, my attention span feels like I'm regressing to like about a 7-year-old again. I'm down to about 5 minutes where I can really sort of concentrate. But interestingly, reading up on some of that, 25 minutes is probably the optimum sort of period for high level sort of concentration. So maybe that's just something that's been suppressed for a few years. One of the things that I'm trying to move towards is trying to have sort of less technology in front of me for having a conversation or one-to-one, and actually just like a notebook. You know, it sounds a bit old school going back to pen and paper, but I find I retain more things even if I write down my rubbish, scrawly handwriting notes, and that helps you remain sort of present in the sort of room. But it's a real challenge, I think, for us in our current operating environment where we're a bit in the office and a bit hybrid, working from remote locations. It's a real challenge to make people feel included in those conversations as well.
Thanks, Pete. That idea I really like. I'll take it forward. I'll personally try to use writing down, picking a notebook and writing it down. Actually, that helps.
I think a really interesting way of doing things. If ever you get an opportunity, go to, there's a restaurant in Sydney called Bistecca. And the first thing they do when you go to sit down for your meal is they ask you to put all your devices in a box, which they then go and lock away. Forces you to have a conversation with the people you've gone for a meal with, or it'd be very, very quiet. But I think it's an interesting tactic to try and actually get people to be present in the room.
I really like it. You know, Pete, you have a couple of times brought this into the discussion. Now it's my question on that particular topic. Life is different after COVID. Our working style has changed. Now we are moving into the hybrid style of working. Now, can you share your experience working from home and managing a remote team? And particularly, how did it impact project deliveries?
Yeah, I think it was really interesting. The 2 lockdowns periods in Sydney. There's some things about, trying to establish a rhythm for yourself personally. I think they're important. How we worked as a sort of team to get things done as well. Dropping into that sort of regularity of conversation, but also trying to permeate the day with sort of breaks to whether it's to go for a walk and do calls on walks and things like that, change things, but also trying to find ways to inject some of the sort of casual conversations that you'd otherwise have in an office to make it feel a bit like an office environment. I was sort of amazed at the way that we still managed to get projects delivered throughout COVID with this sort of the construction pause as well, which knocked a few of our projects sideways a little bit, and some of the resourcing issues our contractors had. Our ability to sort of get things done, still be out and about on site, but in a much lower key type way, in a much less intervened way, also helped. But I think it's just that sort of collegiate way that project teams sort of still manage to get together and get sufficient, team activity time to actually do the things that needed to be done to sort of keep our projects live. Managing to do major procurement in a remote environment, working from home environment was just astonishing, really. But I do think that now we're out the back of sort of COVID. We did a big rail delivery team day the other week, 1st of September. We had about 350 people in the room. It was really good to see, and the vibe at the time, really positive. So many people who've not seen others in such a long time. I think that helped to remind everybody that, whilst we're human beings as individuals, we've come from a long history of working with other people, to actually get things done. And I think that whole environment really built on that. It was just like amazing, like looking at some of the photographs that were taken of the event during the event. So many occasions where there was a photo of a couple of people talking to each other, not necessarily from the same section, same area. You could actually feel the energy in the photos and like the sort of the joy in people in just being around others. I think sometimes it's very easy to have a like functional system that sort of works, but sometimes it's not just about what you do, it's about how you do it, and it's about having fun while you do it as well. I think that's something I've always taken through all of sort of my sort of career. No matter what the working environment is, we should always have fun doing whatever we're doing. When the fun stops, then it's probably time to go and find something new to do in your life.
Yeah, agreed. There's a lot of discussion and going on in the internet about hybrid working or working from home or complete working from office. So from your perspective, which of the three options would you vote with?
So like I don't think there's a simple answer to that. I mean, I've always, in my working career, I've always worked time and hours that sort of worked for me before we even invented this thing called flexible working. When I worked on West Coast route mall in London, my sort of typical day was I'd be on a 7:00 train out of Rugby. I'd be able to work at the table on the train. I had power on the train and Wi-Fi on the train, all those good things that we need to have in Australia. So I was able to work for like 45 minutes on the train down to London, clear a few things out of email, walk round the corner, get to the office, and I'd be there sort of 8 till 4-ish. I'll be on the first train back, same again, pick up my kids from nursery sort of before 6:00, and then I'd probably log back on at 8:00 and clear a few emails and things like that whilst there's rubbish TV on. So like that's a very non-traditional sort of working day, if you say 8 till 4 and things like that sort of stuff. But there were some things around the sort of family environment and where I lived and things like that that made that the best construct of time for me. And I think it's really important that people work out with them, with their team and their manager and people like that, what works for them, what works for the organisation that they're in, and that sort of that flexible approach works for both parties. And that's the thing that's really important. It's like, whether it's hybrid working, if you can do all your work from home, that's an amazing opportunity to have. But does that detract from the conversation that you might be missing out on from someone who might otherwise be sat next to you? Or that ability to turn around and get a second opinion. If I turn around at home, I get a second opinion from the cat. But, to have someone sat next to you and you go, I've just had this email from XYZ, that's the hard thing we're all sort of trying to navigate through. Is like there is value in all of those things. Trying to work out what's best, it's not a simple equation.
I would like to ask a completely different question, which would help people preparing for their next step in their career. So it's pretty much like an interview question. Apart from communication and interpersonal skills and the ability to negotiate, resolve conflicts, building commitment within the team, these are the generic terms we use before appointing someone. So we use these terms to prepare for the interview. But what actually, from your perspective, what are those 3 top skills which you think are most effective to appoint a person before, like a senior project manager or a project director, etc.?
Get me to give away all the secrets now. I don't know. I think like each sort of, it depends what sort of role you're sort of looking for, and it depends a little bit on the status of sort of project and that sort of thing. But generally, you're looking for someone who's got like good sort of team leadership skills, definitely in there. But really, I think you've got to look for smart people. Smart people will understand problems. Smart people who can get on with people is the ideal sort of characteristics you're sort of really looking for. They'll work out how to get the best out of their team and the team environment. You need people who can work well across the sort of boundaries as well, like people who can get on and actually understand what the contractor's sort of driving for, or the consultant. It's a sort of design situation, because it's about building relationship. Because if you like forge a good relationship, generally it's much easier to actually have, like, to get to the desired outcome that you sort of want. So you want people who actually understand the organisation sort of values, and people who can think smart, because inevitably smart people are adaptive, like they're engaging, they'll work out how to get the best out of the people around them. Because there's no one singular person that does everything these days. There are not many Bradfields and Brunels out there that do things unilaterally. Those days are sort of gone. It's more that sort of combined collaborative effort, whether it's in small team environment or big organisation environment. Those are the things that drive to sort of success. So you're looking for people who can do those sort of things.
Brilliant. Thanks, Pete. This really helps for people like me who want to move ahead in their career, and people who are listening, they got something to take away and how to prepare for their next step in their professional career. Apart from that, this one typical question which I ask Mark Wilde and Howard over on my podcast, I would like to ask the same question to you. With the current scarce resource market, particularly across the transport sector, what things do you think transport can do to build a robust talent pipeline within the organization?
So really, it's a big question. It's something we keep talking about in transport, and we've been talking about it for a while. I think in terms of resourcing, we have to sort of accept there are a lot of changing skills required. And I think things like digital systems, we're almost into the land of software writing in some of the work that's going on there. That's not a real skill set that you would have seen very prevalently in most engineering or client organizations 30 years ago. Things will change over the sort of next 10 years in terms of the skills that we need. But those sort of critical resources, I think it's really important that we establish ways of growing our own. So whether that means us getting involved in school environments, particularly associated with our projects, because I think those type of things leave a lasting impression on people. And some of those kids will grow up to become, engineers, environmental managers, PMs, whatever they'll become, software writers into the future. Like some of the things that we can show them, we do amazing things. Getting in at school level is a great way to start. And then similarly building up from that into getting into the universities as well and trying to, make people aware that there's Transport for New South Wales is a great place to come and work. There's such a wide diversity within there. And within Transport for New South Wales, obviously, then you've got infrastructure in place and there's a great variety of projects and things like that. And then you get to rail delivery, which is obviously, there's a great variety and brilliance of things that are going on in there. So getting into schools, getting into universities and trying to attract talent through some of the clever things that we do is really what we're going to do about moving the resourcing problem, because it's only going to get sharper. The volume of work that we have on within New South Wales, within the Australian Eastern Seaboard, it's huge. So we need everybody under the sun really to get on board. And also, going back to that, we need smart people. Smart people will think about things slightly differently. They'll come up with the clever ways of processing things, the clever ways of, changing the way that we do projects. They'll think about changes we need to make in terms of our construction methodologies, all of those things. They'll help bring the change that we need to make things leaner, quicker, slicker into the future, because we won't be doing, certainly, like I say, 30 years on, we're not doing things quite the same way as we did when I started. And in 30 years' time, I hope it's going to be very different in terms of project delivery for whoever's leading the charge then, sort of thing.
That's a bright ideas, Pete. And I'm really glad that most of the senior leadership are targeting from the school level, because previously when I spoke to Helen Williams or Nadine, Howard, everyone goes to the school level. So I think this new approach of targeting not just universities, but right at the school level is a very, very brilliant idea. And I really like it. I'm looking forward that when we implement it in the real life.
I think that there's in the way that we as professional transport people outside of work, the way we talk about our jobs and the things that we do, everyone talks about barbecue conversations and things like that, but there's a degree of reality there. If you're talking to families and neighbours, what rubs off in your conversations with their kids makes a difference.
Yeah, completely agree with that. Pete, my last question before I let you go, what's your one piece of advice to our listeners?
Do not be afraid to do some different things. My sort of career has been littered with stumbling into opportunities, or people going, "We've got this problem over there. Could you just go and have a look at it? And could you spend some time over there and do that?" And it's only after about 20 years of responding to people saying, "Can you go and have a look at this? And can you go and fix this? Or can you go and do that?" You actually realise that they're putting you forward for jobs and opportunities because they recognise that you can do something about it, and they think that you'll be a success in that sort of thing. So if someone taps you on the shoulder and says, "Have you ever thought about going and doing this, or getting involved in digital systems, or going and fixing a rolling stock project?" It's probably because they think you've got some skills to go and do that. So if you're presented with opportunities, don't be afraid to take them. And the worst thing that could possibly happen is if it all goes wrong, you'll have learned some things, and you'll be better off for what you've learned. But invariably, no one's looking for people to fail. So people get asked to go and do jobs because there's a lot of organisational belief behind them being a success in that sort of role. It took a long time for me to sort of realise those sort of things. But yeah, take any opportunity that's presented to you.
Thank you. Wow, what a piece of advice. I would really take it. That's the whole point of this podcast. So, all your 30 years, we can't wrap it in half an hour, but that advice really works pretty well to many people, especially me. And thanks for your time,
No
Pete.
worries. Thanks, Rahman.
I believe everyone listening to this podcast has got something to take away from today's discussion. If you like this podcast, please listen, follow, and share this podcast within your network. If you believe we should be sharing your story or someone within your network, there is a railway leader who should be here sharing his or her contribution to this industry, contact me on railwaytransportationsystems@gmail.com. Thank you for your time today. See you next fortnight. Until then, stay safe and take care of yourself.